All right, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that, well, it hasn't just captivated human imagination for decades. It really promises to fundamentally reshape our world. It's a field that's seen incredible breakthroughs, absolutely, but it's also grappled with its fair share of skepticism, and let's face it, some pretty significant challenges. Artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
We've gathered a truly fascinating collection of sources, everything from the foundational texts that first dreamed up thinking machines to, the cutting-edge research and insights defining AI's really complex journey today.
And what's truly striking here, I think, is the kind of pendulum swing in our understanding and our capabilities.
Right.
We've gone from this huge optimism, almost boundless, to periods of pretty significant doubt.
Right, the AI winters.
Exactly, the winters. And now we're back in this, renaissance of innovation. This deep dive will really help us connect the theoretical dots, between those earliest conceptual ideas and the transformative technologies we see everywhere now. But it also reveals why certain fundamental questions and criticisms, both old and new, have always been part of the conversation. And they still are.
Totally. So our mission for this deep dive is to explore this incredible evolving landscape. We want to understand not just what makes AI tick, but how it learns, where it really excels, and critically, where it still struggles.
Yeah, the gaps.
The gaps, exactly.
Yeah.
We'll trace the lineage of these concepts, from those bold philosophical underpinnings to the groundbreaking cutting-edge applications, and maybe peer into the economic and ethical implications that they inevitably come with such powerful tools. This isn't just about the tech, it's about what it means for you, for us, and really for the future of human society. We throw around terms like thinking machines all the time, but what does that truly mean? How do we even start defining intelligence when we're talking about something artificial, something we build?
It's a huge question.
It is. And it dates right back to the very dawn of the field. Take Alan Turing. Way back in 1950, he laid out this brilliant thought experiment. He called it the Imitation Game.
Which we now know as the Turing Test.
Right, the Turing Test. He imagined an interrogator trying to tell the difference between a human and a machine just based on, their typed responses.
Yeah.
And he had this remarkably broad, really prescient vision for what a machine capable of passing this test would need to do.
Yeah, it wasn't just about calculation.
Not at all. He suggested it be assessed in almost any one of the fields of human endeavor that we wish to include. I mean, that's a huge canvas, isn't it?
It's massive.
He thought maybe it would need to explain complex social situations, or draw nuanced inferences from scientific data, or even, get this, write sitcom scenes, demonstrating a really human-like grasp of diverse cognitive stuff, way beyond simple math.
And a really critical nuance from Turing's original idea, something highlighted in The Singularity is Nearer, was that a successful AI would also need to deliberately avoid seeming superhuman.
Oh, right. Too perfect is a giveaway.
Exactly. If the machine could instantly rattle off encyclopedic answers or speak 100 languages fluently without pausing, well, that perfection would immediately betray its non-human nature.
Interesting.
It shows this profound early understanding that intelligence isn't just raw processing power or knowing facts. It's also about the way that intelligence is expressed. The natural rhythm, the occasional or
Even making mistakes sometimes.
Perhaps even that, the subtle fallibility that defines human interaction. And what's really fascinating is how Turing's initial vision for the machines concerned in the game was pretty wide open, initially allowing for every kind of engineering technique.
They're not just computers initially.
Not necessarily, but he quickly narrowed it down to electronic computers or digital computers, emphasizing what he called their discrete state nature.
Okay, discrete state. What does that mean in simple terms?
It basically means these machines operate by making sudden jumps or clicks from one quite definite state to another. Think of it like flipping a light switch. It's either on or off, no in between.
Gotcha. Not like a dimmer switch.
Exactly. Not like an analog system that might smoothly transition through a continuous range. Digital computers move through distinct, measurable steps. On, off, square A, square B. This characteristic, this idea of distinct states, was fundamental. It meant you could formally reason about them, program them logically.
So that initial idea from Turing, it really anchors this fundamental question that we're still wrestling with today.
Yeah.
How do we define intelligence, artificial or otherwise? What are we actually trying to build here? Is it just outcomes, or is it the process too?
It's a deep one.
But, okay, once we had that sort of conceptual goal, the next massive step was figuring out how to actually build these thinking machines. What were the first, physical inspirations?
Right, the nuts and bolts. Well, if you connect this to the bigger picture, the earliest attempts weren't just about logic gates and circuits. They were deeply inspired by the brain itself, the architecture of human thought.
Biology informing engineering.
Absolutely. It started with trying to understand the biological basis of thought. So back in 1943, you had McCulloch and Pitts. They developed what they called a logical calculus of ideas immanent in nervous activity.
Sounds complicated.
It does, but essentially it gave a foundational mathematical way to think about how networks of simple neuron-like units, when connected in the right ways, could actually perform complex calculations. Abstract models, sure, but a huge step. Showing simple parts could lead to complex behavior.
Building blocks.
Exactly. Building on that, you then had pioneering work like Rosenblatt's perceptron in the late 50s. This was basically a single processing unit with threshold nonlinearity. Think of it as a very simple artificial neuron.
Okay.
And then similarly, Woodrow's adelines, or adaptive linear elements, another attempt to model these functions around the same time. The crucial thing about these early units, as you see in sources like neural networks for pattern recognition, was their adjustable parameters, or weights.
Weights, like dials they could tune.
Sort of, yeah. They could be learned directly from data. The machine could adjust these weights based on whether it got an answer right or wrong.
So these were like the very first digital neurons, taking inputs, doing a simple calculation, giving an output, and crucially learning by adjusting those internal weights based on feedback.
That's the core idea.
That sounds remarkably clever for its time, hinting at machines that could actually learn from experience.
Oh, they were revolutionary, opened up entirely new research paths. But, and this is important, while these early models were groundbreaking, they had, well, very limited capabilities. Even their creators knew it. Rosenblatt himself, seeing the limits, tried to improve the performance of the perceptron by adding a layer of fixed processing elements to transform the raw input data. You can kind of see these as early attempts at feature engineering, trying to pre-process the data to make the perceptron's job easier.
So what were those limitations? Why did they need workarounds so quickly?
Good question. One really significant restriction, which neural networks for pattern recognition details, was that a single layer of weights in a perceptron could only create decision boundaries which surround a single convex region of the input space.
Okay, convex region. What does that mean practically?
Imagine you've got data points on a graph, say two types, apples and oranges. A single perceptron could draw a single straight line, or maybe a simple curve, to separate them.
Right.
But what if your data looked like a donut, say apples in the middle, oranges in a ring around them? A single perceptron just couldn't draw one line or simple curve to separate the apples from the oranges. It was stuck.
Ah, I see. It couldn't handle complex shapes or patterns.
Exactly. It was a fundamental geometric limitation. It meant it couldn't solve many problems that seemed pretty straightforward to us, anything that required a more complex, nonlinear separation.
Right, so despite that initial buzz, that burst of excitement around ideas like the perceptron, these early systems quickly hit some fundamental roadblocks. It turned out just stacking simple units wasn't nearly enough to tackle complex, real-world problems.
Yeah, reality check.
And this period, looking back, marked what a lot of people now call an AI winter. Funding dried up, enthusiasm waned. Basically, the grand ambitions kind of crashed into the hard limits of the early tech. And Marvin Minsky and Seymour Papert, their work was absolutely key in highlighting these challenges. They really exposed the weaknesses.
This was a truly critical and honestly a pretty sobering moment for AI research. Their 1969 book, Perceptrons, was hugely influential. They rigorously showed that these perceptrons faced really profound topological limitations, especially on tasks that to us humans seem incredibly easy, almost intuitive.
Like what?
Well, for example, they showed a perceptron really struggled with recognizing something as basic as connectedness in an image.
Connectedness, like if two dots are joined by a line?
Exactly. Imagine a simple grid of pixels, like an old TV screen. They called it a 100 by 100 toroidal retina. Any perceptron trying to figure out if two things on that grid were connected would need these partial functions that each look at many hundreds of points. It wasn't just a minor bug, it was a fundamental problem with the architecture.
Wow.
And they emphasized that the fantastic number of possible partial functions with such large supports sheds gloom on any hope that a modestly sized, randomly generated set of them would be sufficiently dense. Basically meaning you couldn't just randomly wire up enough of these simple units and hope to solve it. The sheer number of connections needed was astronomical, beyond anything practical.
That's incredible. A computer that can't reliably tell if two dots are connected? It seems effortless for us.
Right.
It really puts into perspective the hidden complexity of even basic human perception. What seems simple to us is often computationally really hard. Minsky and Papert weren't just finding a small bug. They showed a deep systemic flaw. Just piling on more neurons wasn't the answer.
No, a fundamental rethink was needed.
It forced people to really reconsider how to even model intelligence.
Precisely. Their work showed that the number of partial functions that have to be used would exceed physically realizable limits for certain problems, even with infinite computing power. Theoretically, the design was insufficient.
It wasn't about subtle stuff then.
No, it was about basic, taken-for-granted responses central to human understanding that these programs just couldn't get. It made people ask, are we really modeling intelligence or just solving very specific, maybe even contrived problems? And the feeling then was, maybe it's the latter.
And it wasn't just perceptrons hitting these walls, was it? The whole field, especially mid-century, saw lots of ambitious projects kind of fall short.
Oh, absolutely. That contributed hugely to that first AI winter. The dream of truly general AI seemed to dim quite a bit. As sources like Mind Design point out, general problem-solving programs have long since hit a plateau. The idea of a single program to solve any problem didn't pan out. Even things that got big funding, like mechanical language translation, proved so elusive and frustrating that even military funding has dwindled.
Wow. Even the military backed off.
Yeah, and that was a big deal back then. Advances in pattern recognition were called painfully small, and they mostly worked only in these contrived special universes, simplified artificial worlds, not the messy real world.
Right.
Even Turing himself, the great visionary, acknowledged limitations. He talked about mathematical objections like Gödel's theorems, showing there are just certain things that such a machine cannot do, even if it had infinite processing power. Limits baked into the logic itself.
So it really wasn't just about needing faster computers. It was deeper than that.
Yeah.
Theoretical problems.
That's the key takeaway from that era. It highlighted this huge gap. The amount of computing power which has become available isn't enough if the theory is wrong. The problem wasn't just speed, it was the fundamental approach. Stuart Russell puts it so well in Human Compatible. Faster machines just give you the wrong answer more quickly if your underlying methods are flawed.
Ouch. That's a powerful statement.
It really is. It emphasizes that you need conceptual breakthroughs, not just faster hardware. Those early struggles showed that building real, general intelligence is way more complex than just scaling things up. It needs deeper understanding, better theories.
Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. Through that AI winter, we eventually emerge into a new era. And this one's largely driven by a renewed, almost fervent interest in neural networks again. But this time with absolutely crucial advancements.
A comeback.
Definitely a comeback. This is where it gets really interesting as deep learning emerged. A scientifically inspired approach that just breathes new life into the field, setting the stage for the AI we see everywhere today. The core idea, once kind of dismissed, was revisited with fresh eyes, way more powerful computers, and some really ingenious new techniques.
That's right. Yoshua Bengio, one of the figures often called a godfather of deep learning, he describes it as featuring layered structures that progressively represent more abstract concepts. This layering was key.
Layers upon layers.
Exactly. It allowed the network to build up complex understandings from simpler features. Kind of like how our brains process vision from lines and edges to objects and scenes. And the critical development, the engine for this revolution, was a technique called backpropagation.
Ah, backpropagation. We hear that term a lot.
Yeah, and Architects of Intelligence notes it became crucial to deep learning success. Think of it like this. If you're learning a complex, multi-step math problem and get the final answer wrong,
Right.
backpropagation is like a system that doesn't just say wrong, it traces back through every single step you took, pinpointing exactly where you went wrong at each stage, allowing you to adjust your understanding precisely.
So it tells the network not just that it was wrong, but how it was wrong, layer by layer.
Exactly. It allowed these complex, layered networks to learn efficiently by distributing the error signals back through all the layers. This enabled incredibly precise tuning of all the internal connections, something that was basically impossible before.
So that was the engine that finally made these deep networks practical to train. They could learn from mistakes in a much more sophisticated way, refining every single neuron, not just the final output layer.
Precisely. Future-Proof Yourself describes it as networks adjusting weights via backpropagation to increase the probability of the correct class for each training example. They just keep getting better with more data. Now, historically, the idea of using multi-layer perceptrons, MLPs, for things like denoising, that goes back further, LeCun in 87, Gallinari et al., also in 87.
Okay.
But the real conceptual shift to what we now call deep learning wasn't just using more layers. It was the specific goal of learning a good internal representation as a side effect of these tasks. That came later with things like denoising autoencoders around 2008, 2010.
So it wasn't just about getting the right output, but about the network developing a kind of understanding internally.
Exactly, a hierarchical understanding of the data itself. And these layered structures were vital because they allowed for nonlinear activation functions. These mathematical functions transformed what would otherwise just be stacked linear layers. Remember the straight line problem?
Yeah, the convex region thing.
Right. These nonlinear functions turned them into highly expressive models capable of modeling nonlinear relationships. They could now effectively draw incredibly complex shapes to separate data, tackling problems that were totally out of reach for the early perceptrons.
But even with backpropagation making training feasible, training these really deep networks with many, many layers wasn't easy, right? They hit their own problems, like vanishing gradients.
Oh yeah, that was a major hurdle. It threatened to derail the whole deep learning comeback. Vanishing gradients meant the learning signals, those error corrections, just got weaker and weaker as they traveled back through the layers.
Like a whisper getting lost down a long line.
Exactly like that. The signal faded, preventing the early layers from learning effectively. But then came an ingenious architectural trick highlighted in Future Proof yourself. Residual connections.
Residual connection.
Yeah, they essentially created skip paths. Think of them as information highways that let the gradients bypass intermediate layers and flow directly back to earlier layers much more easily.
Like an express lane for the learning signal.
Precisely. This brilliant trick alleviated the vanishing gradient problem and allowed training networks far deeper than anything before. Think of ResNet 152, incredibly deep. And remarkably, it even used fewer parameters than an earlier network like VGG19 while being more accurate. Clever design trumping brute force.
Wow.
Another key innovation was batch normalization. This made deep models significantly easier to learn by normalizing the input to each layer. Like standardizing ingredients before baking it prevents weird statistical effects in one layer from messing up the next, making the whole learning process much more stable.
So it's not just about stacking layers. It's about smart connections, smart normalization,
Yeah,
real engineering ingenuity.
absolutely. And they faced other issues too, like cliffs and exploding gradients. Sometimes, especially in networks with many layers, the error signal could grow exponentially going backward, creating these extremely steep regions in the maths.
Like falling off a cliff.
Yeah, the learning process could just jump wildly off track, destabilizing everything. So they developed gradient clipping, basically a safety brake, reducing the step size to prevent these huge jumps, especially vital in recurrent neural networks that deal with sequences.
Okay.
And then for efficiency, especially getting these things onto phones and smaller devices, you saw innovations like depth-wise separable convolutions made popular by MobileNet and bottleneck layers. These let you build more layers or a wider network under the same resource constraints, critical for scaling up. It all speaks to this constant refinement, this engineering brilliance driving progress.
And this whole deep learning revolution, it wasn't just anonymous technical papers. It was driven by brilliant people, right? We hear names like Yoshua Bengio, Demis Vazquez, Andrew Ng.
Absolutely. And each brings a slightly different but vital perspective. Andrew Ng, huge in AI education and application, he acknowledges deep learning's power, but is always looking for breakthroughs beyond supervised learning, pushing towards AI that can learn more independently.
Right, less hand-holding.
Exactly. Then you have someone like Demis Hassabis, co-founder and CEO of DeepMind. He holds this fundamentally optimistic view of AI's potential to solve complex global challenges. He really believes it can unlock new solutions in healthcare, science, if we handle it wisely.
It's inspiring, that mix of ambition and awareness of the responsibilities, not just building tech, they're shaping the conversation around its impact.
Indeed. And leaders like Bengio, they really stress the importance of academic freedom and collaboration. They know this stuff is too complex for silos. They're shaping the future discourse, responsible development, inclusion, a shared vision. It really makes you think about how we foster that globally, collaboration over pure competition, these individual contributions, the shared effort. It really underlines that AI progress is fundamentally a story of human ingenuity working together.
Okay, so we've traced the technical journey, the ups and downs. But for most of us, the big question is, what does all this fancy engineering actually do for us now in the real world?
Yeah.
What's the impact of these deep networks and backpropagation?
Yeah, the payoff. And arguably one of the biggest impacts of modern AI, especially how it's used widely now, is its incredibly advanced ability to make predictions.
Predictions.
Yeah, as the book Prediction Machines puts it really well, these new AI advances were, in one sense, just an advance in the statistics of prediction. But, and this is the key bit, they took previous statistical methods to another plane.
Okay, leveled up statistics.
Massively. This shift opened up applications where prediction was already used. Think finance, credit scoring, fraud detection. But critically, it expanded into areas where people didn't realize prediction could be used, like image classification with stunning accuracy, or self-driving cars navigating complex streets.
Right.
Think about your smartwatch. Using AI, it analyzes subtle heart rate patterns to predict irregular heart rhythms, maybe diagnosing issues before you even feel symptoms.
That's pretty amazing.
It is. Or monitoring sleep to predict your overall health trends. It's prediction penetrating everyday life.
Framing it as prediction machines is actually really helpful. It clarifies that these complex systems are basically forecasting outcomes from data. And that simple idea has huge implications everywhere.
And crucially, this predictive power even extends to what we normally think of as human judgment.
How so?
Well, systems are trained by showing them tons of examples of human decisions in different situations. They learn to predict. What would a human likely do here? This lets us automate tasks where writing down every single rule is just impossible.
Like driving.
Exactly. Companies like Waymo, they've been successfully testing automated ways of transporting people. A key part wasn't just teaching rigid rules, but teaching the car to drive like a person, learning to avoid sudden stops and instead smoothly halt by predicting and mimicking comfortable human driving. It's predicting subtle human preferences and behaviors.
Okay, and one of the most visible examples of this predictive power, something that's really taken the world by storm, is large language models, right? LLMs. The tech behind things like ChatGPT.
Oh, absolutely. The progress there has been astonishing. Co-Intelligence talks about how ChatGPT, even the earlier GPT 3.5 version, started to show abilities that no one expected or programmed into it. Abilities that make it seem human-like. Writing stories, poems, code.
Yeah, that was a moment.
It really was. And then Brave New Words notes that GPT-4 surpassed anything aspiring AI researchers imagined, making even seasoned developers wonder if they are living in a simulation. It was that big a leap in generating convincing text.
I think a lot of us felt that awe, maybe mixed with a little unease seeing it the first time. It felt like a real shift. But it's not all perfect, is it? There were some pretty big limitations people need to understand.
This is where critical thinking is essential. A huge, widely known challenge with LLMs is their tendency to hallucinate or confabulate.
Hallucinate, meaning they just make stuff up.
Basically, yes, they generate incorrect, factually wrong, sometimes nonsensical answers, but they present them with complete confidence. Because they're fundamentally text prediction machines, trained to predict the next most likely word based on statistical patterns, they get very good at guessing plausible-sounding answers that can be subtly wrong or just plain fabricated.
And they sound so sure of themselves.
That's the danger. And Co-Intelligence points out, even if you catch an error, they can often double down, try to justify the wrong answer, and maybe even convince you it was. It highlights a deep issue. Linguists Emily Bender and Alexander Koller argue in These Strange New Minds, the core limitation is that the language modeling task, because it only uses form as training data, cannot in principle lead to learning of meaning. They're grounded exclusively in text, not in real-world sensory experience like humans.
So they don't understand like we do.
Think of a brilliant parrot. It can mimic human speech perfectly, construct grammatical sentences, but it doesn't understand the meaning behind the words because it lacks that grounding in the real world. It learns patterns of words, not the reality they refer to.
Okay, so this limitation, where AI is amazing at some things but really struggles with others, sometimes unexpectedly, that brings us to this idea of the jagged frontier.
The jagged frontier, it's a perfect metaphor for AI's current state. It's not a smooth, even advance, it's patchy. For instance, Co-Intelligence mentions a study where consultants using a powerful AI actually fell asleep at the wheel and made big errors. Why? Overconfidence, complacency.
Wow, so the AI made them less effective in a way.
In that specific way, yes. It shows how AI can make humans more efficient while doing tasks, but paradoxically, introduce new kinds of human errors through the interaction itself. It's complex. Daniela Roos from MIT notes current AI systems lack the true understanding and reasoning capabilities that human intelligence possesses. There's still a significant gap between machine learning and human cognition. They're powerful tools for patterns and predictions, but they don't think like us. Common sense, intuition, real contextual understanding.
So even with all the progress, there's still a fundamental qualitative difference. It's not just about making current AI bigger or faster to reach human-level understanding.
Stuart Russell argues this quite forcefully. He suggests that if you took all the top AI experts, gave them unlimited resources to build a human-level AI by combining all the best current ideas, the result: failure. The system would break in the real world. It wouldn't understand what was going on.
That's a stark warning.
It is. It drives home the immense complexity, the unsolved problems remaining. True, general intelligence that can navigate the messy real world with genuine understanding. Still deeply elusive. Understanding this jagged frontier is absolutely crucial. You need to know when to trust AI, how to use it, and most importantly, where human judgment, human oversight remains completely indispensable.
Okay, so as AI gets woven deeper into our lives, maybe the most immediate personal concern for a lot of people is jobs. Will we get replaced? Will our work just change dramatically? It's a question hitting everyone, from factories to creative field.
It's definitely a complex and hotly debated topic with really different viewpoints. You have people like Rana El-Kalyoubi, who works in AI and emotion recognition, believing that while some jobs may be displaced, AI will also create new jobs. It's seen as a dynamic shift, new roles emerging as old ones automate. Ethan Mollick, who studies AI's impact on work, suggests in Co-Intelligence that AIs will likely operate as a complement to humans, helping with tedious stuff, improving performance, especially maybe for lower performers, AI as an augmentation tool.
Making us better at our jobs, potentially.
That's one vision. But it's not all positive. Co-Intelligence also realistically notes that some jobs, like most translation work, are likely to be largely displaced because AI is getting so good at languages. And Barbara Gross, an AI pioneer, shares concerns about job displacement, emphasizing the responsibility of technology designers to think critically about their system's impacts on society.
So it sounds like a mixed bag. Some roles enhanced, some replaced, some new ones created. That's a lot of change for people in society to handle.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the AI consource offers a more critical take. It argues that AI is often intended to devalue labor by threatening workers with technology that can supposedly do their job at a fraction of the cost.
So less about pure efficiency, more about shifting economic power.
That's the argument. Not just automation, but leverage against workers. You see this playing out with unions like the Writers Guild and SAG-AFTRA, fighting against threats which have been career-ending for many. From generative AI, they're demanding contracts that give workers more control over where and when these tools are deployed, asserting human agency, IP rights.
Right.
It really raises a question for you, listening. How do you prepare for a future where work is changing so fundamentally? How can individual value be preserved, maybe even strengthened, in an AI-driven economy?
And beyond jobs, there are these profound ethical questions about how AI is built, what data goes into it, and this often invisible human labor that makes it all work. The ghost work.
Yeah, ghost work is crucial to understand. Kate Crawford in Atlas of AI talks about Potemkin AI and the Mechanical Turks. She describes how often underpaid workers are required to help build, maintain, and test AI systems globally.
The kind of work.
Things like labeling thousands of hours of training data, tedious digital tasks like identifying objects and images, transcribing audio, categorizing content, or reviewing suspicious or harmful content that the AI can't handle yet. They're the hidden human engine making the claims of AI magic possible.
Wow.
Crawford argues this is part of an extractive logic enriching tech companies while diminishing spaces free from data grabbing. The very act of gathering and labeling data is a social and political intervention, even as it masquerades as a purely technical one. It embeds values. It's not neutral.
So the data itself isn't neutral. It's collected, labeled by people, often with biases, assumptions,
Yeah.
and the AI learns those biases.
Exactly. Bias is a critical, deeply embedded issue tied directly to this ghost work in data collection. Fei-Fei Li co-founded AI4AL specifically to inspire underrepresented groups to enter the AI field and address bias in machine learning. Because the way data is gathered and labeled directly impacts how AI sees the world, reflecting the priorities and biases of its creators. Whose perspective gets embedded? What are the consequences? And beyond bias, there are huge security risks through data manipulation. Prediction machines warns hackers could feed garbage data into a system or subtly tweak the model, causing it to fail badly or give dangerous advice. Imagine a diabetic's AI helper, compromised, suggesting they lower insulin when they need more. Data integrity isn't just about performance, it's about safety. Every piece of data has human fingerprints, good or bad. Understanding that is key.
And as AI gets even more powerful, more autonomous, concerns about safety, about alignment with human values, they just grow, right? Leading to these huge philosophical debates, not just what AI can do, but what it should do.
Absolutely. Stuart Russell, who wrote Human Compatible, is a major voice here advocating for safe development of AI systems. He stresses needing a clear understanding of intelligence, controllable AI, and the ethical implications of creating superintelligent systems. He warns against resignation, just assuming AI will take over. He urges a proactive, human-centered approach. Control, safety, ethics, they're paramount.
And this isn't just academic debate, is it? Companies are grappling with it.
Right. OpenAI famously announced a super-alignment team to figure out how to control superintelligence. Although, the AI con notes that team was later disbanded, and a lead co-founder, Ilya Sutskever, left to start a new company focused purely on safe superintelligence. It shows how intense and fluid the debate is, even within the industry.
So the very nature of advanced AI forces us to ask these fundamental questions about consciousness, sentience, moral responsibilities, stuff that used to be sci-fi. Could AI have rights someday?
Well, connecting this to the bigger picture, the idea of AI sentience or consciousness is still definitely a fringe view for most researchers. But strongly held opinions are emerging. Jonathan Birch, in The Edge of Sentience, notes it's not reasonable to base huge societal actions on empirically unconstrained speculation. We just don't have proof.
Right.
Yet he says the ethical dimension of AI's potential moral status is undeniable. We can't ignore it. If we create something that seems to suffer or shows complex self-preservation, what do we owe it? Some argue, as these strange new minds described, that if AI could experience suffering, it should have moral status, and it's moving beyond philosophy. The EU's Committee on Legal Affairs even suggested the most sophisticated autonomous robots might eventually get the status of electronic persons with specific rights and obligations. Legal personhood for AI.
Wow, that's huge.
It is. It moves way beyond technical problems into deep ethical and legal waters. Do we owe moral consideration to our creations? How do we ensure they serve humanity's interests while navigating this incredibly complex, evolving ethical landscape? Big questions. Outro.
Wow. We've really covered some ground. We journeyed together from Alan Turing's conceptual game, those early visions of thinking machines, through the first triumphs and those challenging AI winters of the perceptron era, all the way to the complex, layered, deep learning architectures of today. We've looked at the incredible breakthroughs, the prediction machines, the powerful language models, but also, crucially, the persistent challenges. That jagged frontier of capabilities and the huge ethical and societal questions that pop up with every single advance.
Yeah, it's really a story of technology, but also humanity constantly grappling with what it creates, pushing boundaries, then wrestling with the consequences.
Totally.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, AI's story really is one of constant evolution. Soaring aspirations, yes, but also some sobering realities. That unseen labor powering it all, the jagged frontier of what it can actually do reliably, and these profound questions about safety, ethics, maybe even moral status. They remind us this isn't just technical, it's deeply human.
Yeah.
It forces us to reflect on our values, our definition of intelligence, our own role in shaping the future. Thinking critically about AI's impacts is just more essential than ever, especially now, with so much information flying around and tech changing so fast.
So what does all this mean for you listening as AI keeps weaving itself into, well, pretty much every part of our lives? From AI tutors like Conigo offering personalized learning to predicting our choices, helping diagnose diseases, its influence is just undeniable. Here's a provocative thought to leave you with. In a world where AI gets incredibly good at predicting human judgment, at automating tasks that once needed serious human brain power, how do we make sure that human agency and those unique, maybe unquantifiable parts of human wisdom, our creativity, our empathy, our moral compass, how do we make sure those things continue to be valued, continue to be cultivated, not just despite AI, but maybe even because of its rise?
Yeah.
What does it really mean to be human in an increasingly intelligent, increasingly artificial world? Something to think about.